everybody, and welcome to a very special session. It's a session in association with Asian Paints. And what we're going to talk about is something that's new, interesting, and very topical. It's really the new era of home, how homes today have become completely different purely because of the pandemic. It's become the center of our social lives, our work lives, and many other things. And how just by sitting in one place in your home, we're navigating a whole new world. So to talk about this, there's a whole bunch of really interesting people I want to introduce you to. There's Pavitra, who everybody knows as the designer or the lead designer at Good Earth for many years, and now the founder and creative director of her own company. And she produces the most beautiful and stunning homes all over the place, and also has an experience-led brand strategy company called Sarmaya that focuses on innovative programming that a lot of younger people in India engage in. And we have Roshini Vadehra is from Vadehra Art Gallery, a director there in Delhi. And her gallery is one of the best ones in the country, represents some of the most iconic Indian artistic names, ranging from Atul Dodia to Shilpa Gupta, Anju Dodia, Nalini Manali, Arpita Singh, B.V. Doshi, and many more. We have Cormac. Cormac Lynch is an interior architect and designer who works globally. He's done works in Dublin, in London, and Dubai, and is very busy in Bombay right now doing hotels, bars, and resorts. And his style is called layered, elegant, sophisticated, and diverse. And then there's Parmesh. Parmesh Shahani is he's many things. Parmesh has written books that are award-winning. He's a passionate advocate for LGBTQIA, I hope I got that right, inclusion in corporate India. He's guided many of the country's best companies to include people in their journeys. His latest book, Queeristan, won awards. He's headed the Godrej India Cultural Lab in Bombay, and he's a TED Senior Fellow, a Yale World Fellow, and a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. And Amit Syngle is the CEO and Managing Director of Asian Paints, who's doing this with us. He's been working with the company for 2 decades across sales, marketing. He's the person behind a lot of one-of-a-kind range of home furnishings, collaborations, and an iconic one with the renowned designer Srila Chatterjee. I'm Srila Chatterjee, and I do many things, and one of them is working in design and creative things. I've been part of Baro and Baro Market and art and all kinds of stuff. I think we should start now, and there's so much to talk about. And I'm just going to throw open a question that can go to everyone. Has the pandemic changed the way you think or the way you believe you are in your relationship to your home?
I'll take that first.
Yes, Pavitra.
Srila, I think absolutely. I think what the pandemic has done has allowed us to ground and center ourselves in our homes. And in some way, as Indians, we have returned to an ethos from which we began. The courtyard has always played a very central role in Indian architecture, in Indian homes, as the center of our human experience. And I think what the pandemic has done is brought us back, and I'm specifically talking about us as Indians in a lived experience in India. It's brought us back into the angan of our own homes, and it's centered us, it's grounded us in our own spaces. And we've gone from a world where we stepped out of the house for everything, whether it was restaurants, meeting friends, experiencing theater, connecting with people, work. And we've returned to my mind, to a more indigenous and original Indian way of living. So for me, really, that's what the pandemic, I think, has done.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Pavitra was saying. And, I felt that the whole relationship with the homes now is that of more intimacy, more belonging, empathy, and that of discovery. It's literally, we used to speak about, the whole concept of Har Ghar Kuch Kehta Hai. And I thought, homes now reflect your personality so strongly. And it's not only one corner or one room, it is basically the entire home which is speaking to you far more strongly in terms of how it kind of really relates to you in a very, very strong manner. And it's almost saying that you are really discovering those aspects of home which you never kind of really saw in your busy life earlier, given the fact that now the time which you're spending at home is so much strong in terms of the way you relate to everything, in terms of what's really happening there. So I would say that the whole relationship of personalization, the relationship in terms of your self-expression, I think all that has come really very, very live post the pandemic, as I see it.
Cormac, we've heard two very Indian perspectives. What about you? What's it been like for you?
I think in a lot of ways, our home has become our sanctuary, our restaurant, our entertainment zone, our everything really, and our office, our home office. And I think, interestingly enough, I think when I started interiors, I suppose about over 20 years ago, and when I was studying design in Holland and in Dublin, we were all striving for very modern spaces that were very contemporary and open. And I think it's brought home to us now that in some ways, the traditional way of living, of having separate rooms, offices, kitchens, dining rooms, sitting rooms, are really relevant again to us. Whereas before, that idea of open living was so important. But now, because we're all at home, I think having those separate spaces again is terribly important. And I know in Europe, that was the way it was. Everything was open. We had our families all together, cooking, eating, working in the same space. It's not really like that anymore. If you're working from home, you need to be able to have an office, a quiet space that you can work in. And you need to have big, bright windows, you need a lovely view, because you're at home the whole time. So things have changed. And I think the world of designing a layout, that world is changing, of a building completely and entirely. And I don't think it'll ever be the same again. So that's what I found very much so.
Yeah. Apart from apart from using the home as a workspace and things like that, I know one of the big things that all of us have always done has been socializing, but even that's changed because the pandemic changed so much. Parmesh, you're one of the most social people I know. How did the socializing change in your home?
Completely, but just to build off what everyone else said, Pavitra, Amit, and Cormac, I think what happened in the home was also, for long, our home was a place we designed for other people, to impress other people or to show other people, and it wasn't so functional, at least for me. But in the pandemic, everything got reconfigured. So, we don't have a guest room anymore. We have a study and things like that. It's been completely repurposed and designed for one's own self. And socializing changed so a bunch of things happened, at least with me and my partner. The first is things went smaller and more intimate. So we host friends all the time, but it's never large groups. It's small, it's less number of friends, and for more intimate, meaningful engagements rather than just big parties. We do a lot of stuff ourselves as well now. That pleasure in going in the kitchen and maybe making two things, but wonderfully with our, spending time in making it has become more important. And then we've just stopped caring about the good china or the good cutlery or the good everything. We've just started using everything for ourselves. And then when friends come over, with them as well. But I think so socializing kind of became way more personal. What was for others, we started using for ourselves. And then when other people come over, they kind of enter our circle of intimacy. So at least for me and my partner, these are the small changes that have taken place. Yeah.
So the lines between what's special for other people and what is home have become blurred, and it's special for everyone, right? You're honoring
And
yourself
of course,
more.
much more. I mean, we use everything. There were days when we take out our good wine glasses and drink. I mean, whatever, right? And because it was stressful, and it's been such a journey, that you value intimacy and togetherness, but you value so much more of the family that you have living with you, that you want to honor the everyday specialness,
Yeah.
as opposed to this occasional things with other people. Yeah.
And what about you in Roshini in Delhi? Give us a Delhi perspective to this, because we're all sitting here and saying the same thing in Bombay.
So I think, Srila, the main, of course, difference in Delhi is that we are sort of very lucky to have space. And, I felt particularly blessed because I stay in a farmhouse. And, that especially has been, a real boon, because, as we all know, we prefer to meet people outdoors. And so having a garden helped. And fortunately, I did have like a nice kind of outdoor entertainment space as well, which was equipped with a bar and a dining table. And suddenly, like, that was the space where I was meeting people the most. I completely agree with what Parmesh was just saying, that, even if we were meeting two people from the family, the best china came out, the best menus were laid out. And of course, there was, I call it the banana bread lockdown. Well, I don't call it that. The world calls it that. But that's when, all of us were kind of experimenting with food, with cocktails. We made like a special bar menu for ourselves. We'd never had time to do those kind of things. So I think, that became super special. And also going back to what Cormac said, which was so interesting, and I hadn't really thought that, I was doing that, but I was kind of making my home a lot more comfortable in terms of, I think we all have spent some time redesigning and adding to our homes, having spent so much time there. And so there was suddenly, rugs being thrown out, just sort of making the home more cozy, more intimate, for, any time that a few friends were coming over.
Lovely. Well, one of the things I often wonder is how we all balanced both the pandemic's fear of people and gatherings, and yet having our own private gatherings and doing with people we liked things that were special that would normally not be done at home. I mean, I've heard of people having book readings with a few people, or, cooking clubs, things like that. So did any of you have experiences like that you can tell us about? Pavitra, I'm sure you had something.
I was just wondering, should I say or not? But
yes, do.
I sort of, fools Russian and all that. I actually got married at the beginning of the pandemic, and for the second time. And so to a partner who had children, I have children as well. So we were in the pandemic with a blended family with 4 adult boys, a 14-year-old dog, a 93-year-old Syrian Christian Malayali mother-in-law, and a 78-year-old Tamil Brahmin mother. Okay,
and
so
all of this in one home?
All of this in one house.
Wow.
Of this in one house, and it gave me an absolutely new appreciation for both family and space, because simple things like meal times became really cultural exchange, because what could be cooked and what couldn't be cooked, and we were doing all the cooking and balancing out all of that. And at one point, in fact, we had a badminton court set up in the living room, and it was Abrahams versus Rajarams, and we would play badminton every evening. That was a great way for everyone to get out. So all the angsty stuff sort of came out. But it really, it was a little bit of a crazy experiment. But I think what we really learned is how to appreciate time and space in our own home. And I can completely relate to what Parmesh is saying, because I think what we did, my husband and I, is also try to figure out how to carve out space and time for ourselves in this big jamboree. So how do you sort of connect to your partner or have a conversation or anything at all when you have someone watching a movie, someone's on Zoom, someone's cooking, someone is watching TV, the dog is barking, it just changed this whole nature of this whole idea of what is intimacy, what is time spent alone, how do you create little pockets of silence, if you will, or not. And I think we've come out of it with a far greater tolerance for each other. I think we also, those of us who tend to work outside the home, have this misnomer of an idea that somehow the work that we do outside our home is just radically important, and and therefore that needs to be given sort of pride of place. But just living with intergenerationally with all of these people. My mother is like a modern Mughal. She wakes at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. So she's having breakfast when everyone's having lunch. She's having lunch at 5 in the evening when, people are having tea. And when we're winding down is when her entire Facebook life is kind of getting active. So it was really hard to balance some of these things. I would be on client calls, Zoom calls, talking to people, and my mother thought it was, and she's right. She said, this is my home too, and I'm living here as well, and I don't see why I have to not speak at 4:30 just because you're on a call. So I think these are all realities that we lived with. I certainly did. I stood in line for 3 hours for a papaya in my building. I mean, these are all experiences that I think, well, it's a reality check, isn't it? I mean, for those of us who are privileged and have the opportunity and access to otherwise so much help, so much variety, whether it is what we buy, what we eat, how we conduct our lives. The simplification, I think, was great. I mean, it was tough when we went through it. But when I look back on it now, I think I completely agree with Parmesh. That one thing, that one dish that we would all cook together and enjoy, it just changed the nature of our interaction in our life. And I'm happy to say that we are still married post-pandemic. We survived our mothers and we survived our children. And I also fell in love with this dog. So I think I came out of it ahead.
Well done. Well, one of the things I found which was different in my life was just routine. I mean, because we didn't have children, there was no such thing as an average day, and life went based on what we were doing. And suddenly, because of the pandemic, there was routine. And it was the first time in my adult life there was actually any kind of average that went across every day. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was such a new experience. And I think the feeling of that was it was almost like you started enjoying a home more, because I was there not just at set times in between when I'd be at work or out, but at all times. And it was like learning to fall in love with someone again. So you're learning to fall in love with your home and appreciate things that otherwise you wouldn't. Amit, what do you think?
If I could interrupt, I'm keen. Yeah. I want to ask Cormac. Cormac, did you have to redefine your idea of where home is? Because for you, where were you during the pandemic, and did you feel displaced?
I definitely did. So I went back to Ireland at the beginning of the pandemic. And when I was in Ireland, I was with my mother and father, and I was at home, and it was the same thing as you were saying. You're trying to get everybody to be quiet inside the house because you're having meetings and phone calls and all of that sort of thing. And yeah, it was difficult. And then, I've been going from place to place to place. I'm now in the UK, and I'll be back in India very soon. But yeah, I felt very much displaced.
Just to add to this conversation, like Cormac, I travel a lot. And, the first thing which I felt was, that, I'm just lost. And, to kind of really, I used to go to another room and think, I'm sitting in Paris, and then go to another room and think I'm in New York. So, it used to be kind of comforting yourself in terms of saying at least you're traveling and you're not kind of really relegated to one place, kind of a thing. But I think one thing which really nuanced, which happened, was that the whole sense of timing, okay, your relationship with time really evolved, as I would say, because in a sense, there was time that you were spending almost like 20 hours on literally kind of talking to people all across. I'd just taken over at Asian Paints as the MD, and I was talking to all teams across India and across the world in terms of how we are kind of putting our place together, because there were no rules of the book here. It was something which no one had ever faced. And therefore we were redefining everything to that extent, and you were doing the same thing at home, and suddenly I realized that my wife, who is a very, very keen painter, and she was painting her canvases and I took on painting a wall to that extent. So I think we had a nice time together in terms of really rediscovering ourselves in terms of what we are and what we love. And suddenly, I think, as I said, the fabric of time really changed in terms of what you could do, spend time on, and so on and so forth. So I think it was really amazing that you could kind of really find time. At the same time, you were available to everyone 24/7, because you were just away, a Zoom call away.
Obviously, I think for all of us, the home became so many things, right? And actually read a really interesting quote somewhere that said that home is the quintessential act of social distancing. And it's funny how it became that for all of us. It obviously became a place where we sort of sought comfort and protection and all of those things. And then, it became a workspace for me and my husband. It became school for my children. It became like a playground in terms of, everything else that we wanted to do. Both Harsh and I traveled a lot pre-pandemic. He used to be out 4 days a week. I used to take every opportunity I could to get on a plane and go for an art fair or an exhibition. And suddenly we were home, and I had never spent so much time at home. I'd never spent so much time with my husband. I feel like, I felt like I was suddenly meeting him for the first time. And it was interesting because, I've always been a very kind of routine-based person, and suddenly there was no routine. And so I've, like everybody else, I kind of tried to fill my day with different things. So I did 5 online courses. So I had like fixed hours. I did extended workouts, online courses, meditation, which I had never done before. And being that we had a fair bit of space at home, fortunately I've never been more grateful for that. I always thought my home was too big, and suddenly I couldn't be more grateful for all our kind of separate rooms, because we needed 2 rooms for the kids to do school, and then different workspaces for me and my husband. I'd never heard him talk so much. And, suddenly we were all on Zoom calls simultaneously. So I think the relationship to the home changed in so many different ways, like everybody else. But, more than anything, one just started appreciating, space, comfort, family, bubbles, both the champagne kind and the friends kind. And I think that's what happened.
Sounds lovely. Sounds like it did a lot of good for everybody. Amit, how does Asian Paints define new homes?
Okay, I think when you look at just the trending and looking at seeing how people are kind of finding new homes, I think multifunctionality of rooms in a home is a big trend, which is kind of really coming up, and people are finding that, you know, there is a living room which becomes your office, and there is a gym which can become your office, and there is the entire bedroom which becomes a party place for the kids to that extent. So the whole area of multifunctionality, I think, is a very, very big zone in terms of what we are finding, which is becoming, which is kind of giving literally new nuances to creativity in terms of what you could do with your walls, what can you do with your space, and so on and so forth. And that is something which is a great thing. The other area which we feel which is coming is the whole area of, you know, a little bit of a shift from your own wellness to wellness of homes. Okay, and that's a new area in terms of what's really coming up, because the whole nuance of healthy homes is something which is really becoming very, very live in terms of how we see things around. And earlier people never used to kind of really see that, you know, you're talking about a certain space as to how hygienic the place is to that extent. And I think the whole awareness of the wellness of the home is a new concept in terms of what we are seeing. And I think that is something which is giving birth to lot many products and new nuances which are around the walls in the space. And I think that is something which is great in terms of the trend which we see.
Okay, let's get back to the personal feel. Parmesh, so much happened, and I know how much your home means to you, and how phenomenally personal it is. Was there a shift at all in relationships with your partner, with other people close to you, with somebody who worked in your home? Did that happen because suddenly there was so much more time and focus on your home?
Yeah, relationship though was incredible, because we went through almost breaking up to realizing that, okay, this is it. And I think I know so many other couples who are either getting divorced now or who have realized that, okay, this is it. Or, you know, like Pavitra, who got married and then figured out, okay, this is going to work. If this can work at this time, then it's going to work for the rest of our life. Of course, because the intensity, but you know, there's many things at play, right? I mean, like everyone said, you've probably spent the most amount of time with your partner and also with yourself. So, you know, home became a place where you start exploring things like mental health, wellness in ways that you had perhaps ignored before. And when you start digging deep into your own mental health, wellness, etc., sometimes it's not always meditation, yoga, and feel good. Stuff comes out that maybe you've not addressed for so long and you've kept hidden or pushed under the carpet, metaphorically and otherwise. And then, you know, you have to deal with it in that sense. So, I mean, the past couple of years have been a great intensity, but I think very useful, productive intensity, which has been ultimately very rejuvenating. The other thing I want to mention here is that for a lot of us, home, you know, for me, home has never been refuge. For me, home has always been exuberance. Home has been a canvas. Home has been a place where, and I think maybe it's the same with straight and queer people, but I think for a queer person to have your own home, it's very, very different, especially in a society like India, in which being different in any way, it's much harder for you to have that space in society. So I think to have a queer home, it's a celebration, it's a canvas, it's a way of, you know, planting my flag very much in the world as a, you know, as an out and proud queer person. So I think that exuberant nature of celebrating one's home has become much, much more important to me. That relationship has changed significantly, but also in the context of, you know, for a lot of other queer people. So me and my partner are living together and we can create this queer haven. For a lot of other queer people in our country, their homes are not safe spaces. So during the pandemic, like if you are gay, lesbian, trans, bi, etc., and you're living with your parents who are judging you, who are discriminating against you, who are, you know, and you can't go anywhere because there's lockdown, home then becomes an oppressive place as well. So I think for us, it has been the recognition that we have this privilege of our home being this exuberant place. How then do we create opportunities for other, you know, queer people in this case, to have these accesses. And there's been some interesting, so out of our home, so, going back to something that you were talking about earlier, Srila, the past 2 years have been also Queeristan. The entire journey of the book happened from home, talking to other people, talking to schools, talking to colleges, talking to other people in workplaces, asking them to create, environments of inclusion. But also there's so many other queer NGOs who, again, in the past 2 years have realized that we need to build safe home-like spaces. So there are right now so many trans organizations across the country who are actually creating trans collective homes in Bombay, in Delhi, etc., in Chennai, for marginalized queer people to come together to have this sense of comfort and solidarity within their own home-like spaces. So a lot of this time has been, in recalibrating the idea of home personally, but also at a larger societal level of how important is this home-like space for my community. So it's been quite interesting in terms of a journey inward as well as, geographically outward as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of good things also happened because of the bad pandemic. I know that in Bombay, in buildings across very, many parts of the city, there was a much greater feeling of caring and of neighborliness than there's ever been, where somebody actually got the virus and there'd be food parcels left outside the door, or somebody else taking your dogs for a walk or looking after your children. I think those were the good parts of humanness came out a lot. I know in my own home, and at the time when we were locked down, we were lucky enough to also have with us 2 of our staff members who always lived with us. And we invited our cook to come and stay because he was in a space he otherwise shared with other people. And so we became like a little 5-member community. And it wasn't just about they work for us. We were doing things together and they needed space too in the home. So it was, what is your time to go for a walk, or who's going to cook what today? So I think we were much more thoughtful. And I also feel that it was the greatest time for our dogs. They have never had so much of us. I think they loved the pandemic. 24/7 to have you at home and to have attention was really, and I know that from a lot of people, the sad part of that story is many people who got animals in and then, we're done, we can't look after them. So that was the sad part of the whole animal story. But homes took on so much.
I'd like to add something here, actually. I think the flip side to this is that, all of us got so used to working from home that I find it really hard not to open up my laptop at home now. So, whereas I would, usually be quite strict about the fact that when I was home, I wouldn't check my emails and I wouldn't be working from home. Suddenly, I open up my laptop in the morning before leaving for work, in the evening when I get home. And even now it's even on holiday because I'm so used to logging on to Zooms from the beach or from the mountains. That whole kind of concept of switch off, I don't know how we'll ever go back to that kind of switch off, because you can always log on to a Zoom from wherever in the world you may be.
But I think that's really important. The one point there that I felt was so important was not to have my laptop in my bedroom during the pandemic, because I couldn't get away from work. So, I think we were all probably in that same sort of quandary, I suppose, how to have that work-life balance. And so for me, the spaces of interior design, as I said, your sitting room or your exercise room, or, the bedroom for me was like my sanctuary. Sacred. Yeah, so I wouldn't have my laptop in my room. It was just one of these things for my own peace of mind, or, calmness, I suppose, myself. I just wouldn't do it. So my bedroom became my sanctuary. And actually, I did a lot of work in my bedroom to make sure in the interior, to make sure it all felt very, calm and soothing, because I don't think we'd ever spent as much time at home. Like, we were all at home thinking like, I need to do, we've all been so busy over the past few years before Corona that we haven't spent maybe the time doing up our own homes. I think, for me, even as a designer, I haven't. And this time I really made sure my bedroom was, you know, beautifully done, so that at the end of the day I could go in there and that was my calm area, you know, in that sense. That was me.
I think it's interesting because all of us from the art and design world have always spent so much time in doing other people's homes.
Yeah.
And, you know, your own home sort of ended up getting a bit neglected, and suddenly you were spending so much time that, I mean, I bought art during the lockdown, and, you know, I mean, obviously I do collect art, but, you know, this was a more kind of active seeking of what I could add to my collection. And, you know, obviously there was money being saved everywhere else, and so you kind of had a little bit more disposable income to better your home. And I obviously saw that same kind of pattern in, you know, collectors, both seasoned and a lot of new crop of collectors coming up during this time. Everyone who was spending time at home suddenly realized the importance of design and art and improving the quality of the house.
I think we've all agreed that we're all rah-rahing for the homes, I think, and for our own homes and for everything that it's brought, the refuge it's been, the excitement it's shown, the new eyes we're looking at a home with. And hopefully this is only going to be the starting point for even more. We are all obviously also lucky to have had space, to have been able to look at our home in so many ways. And I think the challenge for everyone and to Asian Paints is that you've got to think of how to do this for people who aren't as lucky, who don't have the space, and how they could also be able to use it in multi ways and with whatever limitations. Is there anything anyone else would like to add, or should we just say, you know, happy to be home?
I want to see a picture of Cormac's bedroom.
Oh, I'm not. Yeah, I will send it to you. Yeah, like
we all want to see it, Cormac.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Like there's so many. I feel that, you know, that was one of the things about the pandemic, was doing my home was so important to me. You know,
you have to show us now.
And thinking of inventive ways to actually buy fabrics and also to buy lights and to buy chandeliers. And it was the same on my projects as well. You know, it was inventive ways of actually realizing them without necessarily always being there. You know, looking at colors, looking at fabrics and textures myself. But then for the projects as well, how do you think of inventive ways to show those, you know, in that sense, without touching things and feeling things.
It's so good to hear this, that, you know, all this inventive ways. I think we have lots of options. I can only tell you that. So once you share your, you know, bedrooms and other things, I think, you know, we will be only too glad to really be with you in terms of really offering you this whole innovation and change.
Well, interestingly, you say that. I've just painted my drawing room in Bombay. I have a big drawing room in Bombay, and I've painted it ochre, an Asian paint, ochre, light ochre. So it's in this yellowy tone, because I felt that, it, you know, one of the things about my house is that it's got lovely bright spaces, big spaces, but I wanted that warmth inside the house. And I know yellow is not a color that people would normally use, but in their interiors nowadays, because of fashion, I don't go with fashion. I think it's so important to just go with what you like. And when I was at home, I thought, oh, I think it would be lovely to have a lovely sunny color inside my house, because that would make me feel warm and cozy inside the space. And I think it's actually come out very well. So you'll have to see the photographs of it. I think it has. Anyway.
Bedroom and living room then.
Yes, yeah.
And in essence, you know, we used to kind of talk of home is where the heart is, and, you know, the home is a reflection of your personality. And, you know, people spend so much of emotional energy around making of the home and really this thing. I think all those nuances have really sharpened and come alive during this entire pandemic. I think it's like given a new lease to all these areas in terms of what we used to speak of. And it is so good to see this now relationship, which is so intense, so intimate, so bonding. I think it's amazing how this relationship has come about. And I think this is an exciting phase in terms of seeing how design and multifunctionality is kind of evolving. So I'm really excited.
Thank you, everybody. I think it's been interesting, fun. I'm looking forward to photographs of Cormac's home, being invited to tea, to watch the mad, to enjoy the mad South Indian family from two parts of South India in the Rajaram home, visiting the farmhouse and living in splendor like we don't in Bombay. And of course, Parmesh falling all over me in the way he always does. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, AD.
Thank you, AD. Thank you, Srila. Thank you, Asian Paints. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Bye.